Welcome, everybody. Anybody here in person for the first time? Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to anybody joining us on Zoom for the first time. Welcome back to everybody else. Good to see you. I'd like to begin by asking you to talk to each other. In service of one of the core principles of Buddhism is developing community. It's called taking refuge in Sangha. Sangha is the word for spiritual friendships, community, connection. And so I'd like to give you a short topic for kind of icebreaker conversation with other people in the room so you can get to meet each other, start to getting to know each other over the period of being here and attending. I'm going to talk about the eightfold path, the core directions of how to wake up. I don't know, I'm going to talk about a bunch of stuff tonight, but I thought I'd talk about ethics and meditation and the wisdom that comes from that. It's called Sila Samadhi Panya. And so for the topic, maybe I think I'm going to go a little bit hard on ethics tonight and the precepts and the importance of ethical behavior. And the Buddha's kind of the low bar that he gave for householders. I was just talking to Tarpa, who's visiting, who's a monk in the Tibetan tradition, and we were talking about the precepts that the monks hold, which are hundreds, 253 rules to abide by as a monk. And for the householders, the Buddha just said 5. Monks, 227 or 250, something. And for us, just 5 simple areas of renunciation in order to really benefit and follow the path. A commitment to nonviolence, not killing, can be seen as non-harming, non-intentional murder, non-intentional harm, nonviolence. A commitment to abstaining from stealing, taking anything that's not offered, that's not freely earned or given or offered. Refraining from sexual misconduct, not cheating, not lying, not manipulating, not being involved in inappropriate relationships with people who are either not single or underage or anything like that. I think underage is a little bit relative. In our culture, it's 18 consenting, but of course, this is an Indian tradition where they're marrying off at 12. So it's a comment about kind of pedophiles and the sexual misconduct, avoiding that, renouncing that, renouncing lying, dishonesty, practicing honesty, practicing rigorous truth telling, and really trying the intention to be honest. And the 5th precept is to abstain from all kinds of recreational intoxicants, not drinking alcohol, even if you're not an alcoholic, not smoking weed, not not using substances to create pleasure. And the main point there is, in order to get free, the samadhi, the mindfulness part of the Buddha's teaching is mindfulness-based, awareness-based, present time awareness. And when we're buzzed, we can't be mindful. When we're intoxicated, we can't be mindful. When we're high, we can't be mindful. And so in service of being able to actually be mindful and to get free using these mindfulness-based awareness explorations, free from drugs and alcohol. So when you think about these 5 areas of renunciation, not killing, not lying, not stealing, avoiding sexual misconduct, and avoiding intoxicants for your small group, which is the one that's challenging for you? Where is it? Is it hard to tell the truth? Is it hard to be nonviolent? Is it hard to not steal? Is it hard to not sleep with people that you shouldn't be sleeping with. It's misconduct, causing harm. The Buddha's teachings for households are pretty liberal around sexuality, consenting adults, single, honest, consenting adults. It's pretty liberal, just not cheating, not lying, not causing harm. Or is it the intoxicants? Is that one that's, I know for a lot of Buddhists who aren't in recovery in our community, probably the majority of us are recovering addicts and alcoholics, because I am, and that is reflected often in our community. So for us, that fifth precept supports our recovery, our abstinence, and it's necessary for us. And we're grateful that the Buddha's teachings support our abstinence. For people who aren't addicts, aren't alcoholics, it's a challenging one. And I think particularly in the West, where a lot of the people who formed Buddhism in the West, the Westerners who brought the teachings here, were the hippies and the beatniks. The beatniks were a bunch of like speed snorting alcoholics, Kerouac and his crew. And, you know, they were like Buddhist junkies. And then the hippies were like, let's eat acid, let's smoke weed, and meditate, you know, altered states, you know, all of this sort of searching for altered states. And so Buddhism in the West, you know, and then even some of the Eastern teachers that came through, I'm going on a rant, I'm sorry. Even some of the Zen masters were alcoholics. Some of the founding Zen teachers in the West were alcoholics. Some of the Tibetan teachers, Chogyam Trungpa, the founder of Shambhala, was an alcoholic. There's been all of these, even this kind of traditions of not only alcoholism, but just sort of it being okay to be a Buddhist that drinks and uses drugs. And so it's quite challenging for some Buddhists to practice that fifth precept and to take it seriously and to not reinterpret it. I got into a conflict once with some of the senior teachers in the kind of insight tradition. And I was saying, you know, for teachers, we need to make this a rule that if you're going to teach Buddhism, you have to abide by the fifth precept. And I was saying it to a bunch of the old hippies who were like still smoking weed, still drinking, still doing psychedelics for fun and spiritual exploration. And they got quite mad at me and said, you know, stop being so rigid, conservative, stop being so Buddhist. Stop trying to take away our drugs. It was just before they kicked me out of Buddhism. So for you, thinking about these 5 precepts, not killing, not lying, not stealing, avoiding sexual misconduct, and avoiding drugs and alcohol, not using them. Small groups, talk a little bit about how that is in your life, where you find it to be challenging, where you find it to be supportive. You only have a couple minutes each. Find people that you don't know. Better to meet new people than to talk to your friends that you're here with. At home, I'll open up the group, the breakout rooms, and I really encourage you to join them. Some of you ditch them. Jump in there, talk to some strangers. Finding a way to sit for meditation. They see you over here. Yeah, there. That's where they see you. Finding a posture that feels appropriate for meditation. Settling into silence, settling into the posture. Allowing your eyes to be closed. Taking a moment to release any unnecessary tension in your body, soften. Release the brow, the eyes, the jaw, shoulders, chest. Soften the belly. And as we establish mindfulness of the body, it works best if you bring an attitude of kindness, friendliness, acceptance. We begin by bringing awareness into the body. Present time, non-judgmental, kind awareness. Mindfulness of the body. Dropping out of the thinking mind, out of the world of hope and fear, into the world of sensation. Disengaging from the tendency to think about the future and past, and bring your full attention to the breath, the body sitting here breathing. It can be useful to note in as you breathe in and out as you breathe out, to track the experience, to stay present with the breath. And likewise, if a thought calls for your attention, you find yourself involved in thinking, just note it, name it, label it, thinking. And then choose to disengage from the thought. Bring your attention back into the body over and over. Part of the function of this first simple meditation practice instruction of being mindful of the breath and body is to help us break our addiction to our minds, to see directly that we can choose to ignore the mind. We don't have to obey it. We don't have to be so identified with what the mind is thinking about. We can let it be in the background. So much of the suffering in our lives happens in the mind. The afflictive emotions, the cravings, the clingings, the resentments. Coming back to the breath over and over, the body becomes a refuge. Just sensation arising and passing. The breath coming and going. This kind of meditation is new to you. If you're new to this practice, just use the breath as the primary object for now. But the Buddha's instructions expanded from breath awareness to become more inclusive. Your whole body, your heart, your mind, the sense doors. Non-judgmental, kind awareness of your whole being. Paying close attention, investigating the impermanent nature of all of the phenomena, all the sounds, how they arise and pass, sensations and emotions coming and going. And including the mind turning towards the process of how thoughts arise and sustain, proliferate, and dissolve. Trying to be less involved in the content of the thoughts or emotions, more interested in the process of change, of transience. Whatever's calling for your attention, whatever you're paying attention to, whether it's a thought or a sound, sensation of the breath, all of our experiences felt as pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. A second foundation of mindfulness, and it's so key to see our relationship to pleasure and pain, neutrality. To increase our tolerance for the unpleasant and begin to have compassion. To develop a friendly relationship to discomfort. To unpleasant thoughts and feelings. And to practice non-clinging, non-attached enjoyment to the pleasant. Whatever pleasure there may be in your heart, mind, body. Allowing it to arise, be present, and pass. To appreciate it without clinging to it. Mindfulness shows us what's happening moment to moment and how it feels. And it also shows us how we're habitually responding, the craving, the clinging, the worrying, the judging. And right here on the cushion, we train our heart and our mind to respond differently, to let go, to forgive, to appreciate without clinging. The last couple of minutes of the formal meditation practice, I invite you to bring the intention of love and kindness into your heart. Saying to yourself, may I be happy just as I am, with this mind, this body. May I be at ease just as I am. And may I be free from suffering, the suffering of clinging and aversion, the suffering of self-centeredness and misidentification with this mind and body as who I am. And extending the same wish to each other, loving kindness from your heart to the people you talk to in the small groups, the people here in the Sangha. May you be happy. May you be at ease. May you be free from all forms of suffering, causes of suffering. And extending this outward in all directions until we include all living beings, the east and west, north and south, covering the whole planet with your goodwill, your well wishes, your compassion. I've been feeling a lot of appreciation and gratitude for the Dharma. I think that pilgrimage that we went on last month really just sort of reignited a deep sense of appreciation in me. I feel so fortunate that we have these instructions, these directions, this path, a map that explains what you can do, what we can do if we would like to not suffer so much. I know that before I started practicing Buddhism, I was lost. I was, lost in addiction, lost in a delusion that if I could avoid pain and create pleasure, that would, well, first of all, just lost in the delusion that was possible to avoid pain. And that there was some sensual or material solution. And so happy that we have this practice and these teachings, this tradition that explains reality, the Dharma. Dharma is, I tend to translate it as truth, but it's also translated as nature, the nature of things, the way things are, and that humility and for us to come to understand that we're out of whack with nature, that we're not living in harmony with the way things are. And that's why even this word dukkha, the first noble truth, its roots, it's a Pali word that we generally translate as suffering. But what I'm told, been explained to me, is that it's a term that has something to do with an axle, like for a wheel. And this image of the wheel is used a lot in Buddhism, the 8-spoked wheel of the Eightfold Path. And dukkha being that there's something wrong with the hub. And so imagine all of us as wheels, and as we're trying to sort of roll through life, there's something wrong with the axle, and so there's a wobble. And every time it goes dukkha, 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 it's a dirty axle hole. It's it's an imbalanced wheel. And it's not true, it's not balanced, it's not in harmony with the way things are. So you're constantly dukkha, dukkha, dukkha. And that in itself, and I say this all of the time because I mean it, the normalizing effect of the First Noble Truth. Because in some ways, the way that I feel it, and I appreciate it so much, is that it's saying that it's not your fault. Because this is a universal teaching for all living beings. This isn't like, like everyone's born into dukkha. Everyone has a imbalanced, if you take birth, if you incarnate, if you're here, the craving for pleasure and aversion to pain and self-centeredness of the human condition is going to create dukkha, suffering, unease, unhappiness, an imbalance, and out of not harmonious. Like nobody's born and then is just like happy and peaceful and free, no matter how good of parenting you get, no matter how good of you're not just like an enlightened being, even if you don't have trauma, even if you don't have the parents you had, even if you had perfect parents, you would still suffer. It's easy for those of us who can kind of point at like, well, my parents were fucked up, that's why I suffered. They didn't, install self-esteem in me. They didn't, whatever it was. I was traumatized, I was wounded, I was abandoned. But this teaching is universal. It's for everyone, even people who have like great parents. Taking birth means you're going to crave pleasure. Second noble truth. The cause of dukkha, the cause of the imbalance, is the repetitive craving for life to be different than it is. We're just not born with a equanimous, accepting, loving, tolerant heart and mind. We're born with a heart and mind that craves pleasure and hates pain and takes everything really fucking personal. I talked all last week about the second noble truth and the repetitive craving, and we went through that list of all of the different words for desire and lust, and it's in our DNA. It's our survival instinct, craving. And again, normalizing the teaching. I hope you hear it and it lands as non-judgmental and non-personal, not your fault. Not our fault, just it's the human condition. It's not just the human condition. Animals are also subject to this craving, clinging. Maybe animals don't have the self-centeredness that we humans have. Animals don't tend to take everything so personal. That's why your dog still likes you. And the third noble truth of the promise, the potential, the Buddha saying, through my own efforts in this lifetime, through mindfulness and renunciation, and this wisdom came to me. Mindfulness led to non-clinging to pleasure, non-attached appreciation. Mindfulness led to compassion for pain. And it also broke my identification with my mind as who I am. Helped me not take it all so personal. See through by turning towards. And then he said, and these 8 factors, this eightfold path. Understanding cause and effect, karma. And this is a big one for us in our culture. Karma is, although it's kind of like culturally appropriated term that gets thrown around, it is, for most of us, there's a bit of a learning curve, and it doesn't necessarily make sense to us that we are totally responsible for our own happiness, and that we're totally responsible for all of our actions, and that all of our intentional actions have a consequence, and that it's not just if you get caught, but that there's a momentum that we create, and our negative behaviors create negativity. Our unskillful behaviors create reverberations that maybe we don't even see right away, but we're responsible for. And likewise with our positive ones. Sometimes you're doing a lot of good and a lot of service, and you're feeling like, I'm not getting rewarded at all. But that there's a momentum that karma is cause and effect. Every intentional action and response, reaction will bear fruit at some point. This is the first factor, understanding. Now, the problem with it is, I think the problem with it, maybe it's not a problem at all, but the problem in understanding it is the teaching says your karma will ripen either in the present or sometime in the future, including perhaps future incarnations. And so we're so material based, one lifetime of like, when's my, why is this shit happening to me? When is it going to get better? I've, done a lot of meditation, a lot of service, a lot of whatever it is. How come I'm not getting the prizes, the karma? Where's my good karma? I've been meditating for 3 weeks or 3 years or whatever it is. And that the perspective is that it ripens in the future. Sometimes in the present, sometimes in the future. I start with that because it's, where the Eightfold Path starts with, but all of the Buddhist teachings, I don't think can really, the kind of the stuff about ethics and renunciation, we have to have it in the context of understanding karma. The reason we are practicing the 5 precepts, what I introduced before we meditated, is because all of that is avoiding behaviors that create negative karma for us. Killing, violence, harming, and the negative karma of that. lying, stealing, sexual misconduct, and the negative karma that creates in our lives. And so the renunciation is so that you don't hurt yourself, even though some of that stuff feels good. And don't you think? Isn't it kind of fun to steal? Fuck yeah. Lying, it's kind of feels sort of powerful when you're exaggerating. Feels sort of cool when you're making some shit up. When you're, pulling one over. So it's kind of somewhat pleasant, some of these that were, even though they're pleasant, violence sometimes, just telling someone to go fuck themselves feels so good, so powerful. I'm right, you're wrong, go fuck yourself, I'll beat your ass. Feels good. Feels so tough. But the karma of that violence, of that, is something that we now own. I feel like this is I feel like it's a little hard to understand sometimes, that some of the stuff that we're encouraged, that the Buddha's encouraging, asking us to give up, is stuff like, and the intoxicants of like, that feels good. I like getting high. That I used to like fighting. I used to like stealing. I used to lying, like all of those behaviors that I didn't see the karma in it. I was just like, oh no, feels good. In one teaching, the Buddha gave this example of like a leper, somebody who has leprosy, and their appendages their hands are maybe, I guess leprosy actually like rots your flesh, and part of it is that it becomes quite itchy. And he says sometimes what we're doing things like it's kind of like a leper who's cauterizing the rotten flesh in the fire, and because it feels good. But what you're actually doing is you're making it worse. And so the Buddha uses these examples of how many times are we doing stuff that feels good that actually is just making it worse. Are chasing sense pleasures, are, so many of us found that in addiction. Like smoking crack felt great. I loved it. Drinking, felt great. But it caused more and more suffering in my life long term. And he says it's like you're picking the scabs and you're, burning the flesh. Maybe another example of that would be like, you ever had a bad case of poison oak? And it just itches so bad. And if I itch this, it's going to make it worse, but it feels so good to itch it. And then all of a sudden it's spreading. It's spreading. And then all of a sudden because that was a pleasant, like itching that scratch, how much of the pleasant things that we do are making our lives worse in the name of hedonism, in the name of indulgence, in the name of bad habits. And so, he gives this simple 5 precepts, like even if you like lying and stealing and fighting and sleeping with people you shouldn't sleep with, don't do that because of the karma. It'll make it worse. Even though it'll temporarily be pleasant, it'll make your life worse. So the classic formula of the Eightfold Path is living an ethical life. Ethics, meditation, and wisdom. Sila Samadhi Panya. Sila is an ethical life. 5 precepts as the baseline. And so I know I came with this kind of gratitude. I'm grateful that I have the instructions, because I didn't know that lying, stealing, violence and sexual misconduct and the intoxicants were causing so much suffering in my life. And I'm so glad that I found a tradition that taught me this is the stuff to avoid if you want to be happy. And likewise with the karma teachings, right speech, communication. How are we communicating with each other? And all of the karma that's happening all day in every single interaction. Everything that we post online, every text message, every social media interaction is karma. And the practice of refraining from dishonesty, refraining from exaggerating or minimizing or omitting the truth when it's pertinent to be told. Practicing communication that is true and useful and appropriately timed. I didn't know anything about that. I used to just say whatever came to mind. Just blurt. And mindfulness, which teaches us to be able to pause and reflect. And what I'm wanting to say, is it true? Is it useful? Is it appropriately timed? And let me have some renunciation, even around the stuff that I want to say that's not so useful, or it's not true, or it's not the right time to say this, to have this confrontation. And right speech doesn't mean avoidance, doesn't mean always playing nice. It doesn't mean that we don't have conflict and face conflict. Sometimes we have to confront each other. Sometimes we have to hold each other accountable, but in the appropriate timing. Sila also includes our relationship to money, ethical, responsible relationship to our jobs. The factor on the Eightfold Path is right livelihood. But right livelihood is just, it's how you're earning. The action of earning is creating karma. Your job is a karma factory. We all work in a karma factory. Whatever we're doing for work, whatever we're doing is creating karma for us all day. And so the Buddha was like, hey, if you're going to be a layperson, a householder that's going to have a job, make sure you don't have a job that's creating negative karma for you in the way that you're earning money. And if you do, if you come into the path and you see, oh, I have a job that has some dishonesty in it, or some violence in it, or some, he said, avoid selling drugs, avoid selling weapons, avoid selling people, avoid killing for a living, avoid usury, the kind of high interest rates. I don't know, if that includes every single credit card, bank company, mortgage loan. I don't know at what point it goes from kind of acceptable interest rates to absorbent. I don't know. Sure. I mean, technically, it gets tricky, because technically right livelihood is not only owning a bar or a liquor store, but it's even working at Whole Foods, who make so much of their money off of selling booze. Even even being a wait person in a restaurant that sells alcohol. That you're profiting off of other people's intoxication, and their intoxication may be leading to some suffering in their life, and you're making money off of their suffering, off their delusion, off their confusion. Now, this is tricky, right? Because we live in a culture where every restaurant, every store, every, you don't want to have to take this, you don't want to be too uptight about this. But the encouragement with ethics is to avoid those things if and when you can, and to find a livelihood that's actually helpful. Find a livelihood that's not causing harm, and that's maybe, I feel like the more we practice, the more we care about compassion, the more we say, actually, I want to try to find a living that is beneficial to others. That's not just how do I make money, but how do I help? How do I find a way to have a livelihood and a life that is beneficial? Not that everyone has to become a social worker, or but and there is something to be said for having a mundane job that's non-harmful, but that you bring your full Dharma practice into. I often reflect on the Siddhartha book by Hermann Hesse, and that story and the way that Hesse created it, where he meets the Buddha, he rejects the Buddha, he goes into indulgence and sense pleasures, and ends as a simple ferryman. Which isn't, I guess you could say you're helping people back and forth across, but it's just like you're a bus driver. You're not a teacher, you're not a social worker, you're just a bus driver. And that's where Siddhartha found his enlightenment, just driving, just taking people back and forth in that simple life, and brought full wisdom and compassion and into that kind of just mundane job. My job is driving you back and forth. Samadhi, so ethics, renunciation, every day, every aspect of our life. Samadhi is effort, mindfulness, and concentration, the last 3, 6, 7, and 8 on the eightfold path. And maybe mindfulness should be first. Mindfulness comes number 7. But again, this is the wheel. And so these spokes on the wheel aren't in order. We think of the eightfold path as 1 through 8. But, and I started with, saying something about number 1, understanding karma. But it's really 7. It's really mindfulness that is the key. Mindfulness is the conjoining factor with just about all of the rest of it. Present time awareness, paying attention to what's happening, what we're doing while we're doing it, what we're experiencing while we're experiencing it. And particularly the second factor of the second foundation of the mindfulness teachings, our perception of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. Every aspect of our life, and it's connected with karma, because when something unpleasant happens and we meet it with aversion, hatred, judgment, even subtly being annoyed, that negative, that aversion is creating a habit of aversion, is creating a karmic momentum of aversion. Tarpa and I earlier before class were talking. He said he's grateful that we have chairs here, and I'm happy to provide chairs and not make everybody be real Buddhist on meditation cushions. But I was saying, I think that one of the benefits of sitting on a meditation cushion is the discomfort. And that so much of what we have to learn, and that we get to learn in sitting in meditation, is how to be still in discomfort, how to tolerate discomfort. And then we can bring that into all of the uncomfortable interactions we have in our life, and sounds and smells and tastes and sensations and emotions and thoughts that we're faced with constantly in life. And we have to learn how to be more tolerant and more merciful and more compassionate. And so there is something about learning to sitting meditation that teaches us that increases our ability to then integrate that into every aspect of our life. We have this whole path laid out for us. It's called the middle path. This path of, here's how you meditate to train your mind. Here's how to behave so you don't create negative karma and the consequences of that. And here's the wisdom, intentionally developing loving kindness, intentions free from ill will, free from hatred, free from self-centeredness. I said it in the instruction, and in simple ways I think about just trying to respond with compassion to everything unpleasant all day, not just in meditation. We learn how to do it on the meditation cushion, and then throughout our lives, trying to respond with compassion, friendliness towards all of the unpleasant things that happen. And so many unpleasant, we're just in a nervous system that doesn't like a lot of our experiences. Just too many unpleasant thoughts and feelings and smells and people, just gross people everywhere. And likewise, and maybe even, I don't know which is more difficult. What do you reflect for a moment? Is it more difficult to meet pleasure with non-attached appreciation or pain with compassion? Because these are the two skills. There's three, but these are two of the major. Can I meet pain with compassion? Can I meet pleasure with non-attached appreciation? And the humble answer for all of us is not very good at either of those. It's counter to our wiring, to our survival instinct to be compassionate towards our pain. There's a little bit of wiring in us to be compassionate towards other people's pain, but not very good at doing it for ourselves. It takes training, it takes practice, it takes discipline to directly realize compassion. Likewise with clinging, with craving, with, none of us are non-attached until we train our heart and mind to be non-attached. Non-attached appreciation for pleasure, compassion for pain is why we meditate, is why we don't just have a spiritual practice that's about being, kind and generous and ethical. Meditation as necessary central discipline to develop compassion and non-attachment. We can't think our way to it. We can't study our way to it. We can't believe our way to it. It's not a belief system. It's an experience. It's a direct understanding from within that I think only meditation can deliver for us, to truly have that. And the third is breaking our addiction, our identification, our self-centeredness in a simple way, but it's the misidentification with the mind and believing it and not having discernment that some of what arises in our mind is just bullshit, is just not true. And breaking our identification with our thoughts as who we are. And even this body as who we are, this impermanent physical form. Part of the mindfulness teachings is that there is nothing that we do or say or experience that is outside of our practice. Every aspect of our life, the Buddha says there's 4 formal meditation practices, postures, sitting meditation, walking meditation, standing meditation, laying down. And then he goes on to say, now also bring this awareness, this non-attachment and this compassion and this non-identification to your relationship to food, to your relationship to sex, to your relationship to driving. He didn't say driving, they didn't have, interactions. Every aspect of our life is meant, we try to be mindful. And so we do the formal practice, we come together, we do the formal practice, you do your daily practice, you come on retreats, you do your more intensive periods of practice, so that we can bring it into every aspect of our life. And it's pretty, I don't know, I love that Even though the Buddha was a monk, he was really good at giving instructions to householders, to non-monastics. Talked about our jobs, talked about our sex lives, talked about a bunch of stuff that he wasn't engaging in, but he said, if you're going to engage in it, here's the wise way to engage. Work, just don't create negative karma at work. Sex, just don't create negative karma in your sex life. Maybe enough. A few minutes for questions, comments, clarifications. Any thoughts? If you have a question at home, you can raise your hand in the reactions tab. Here, you can just, yeah, please.
Talk about mindfulness outside the context of Zen. Is that, or are those two synonymous, or like, is that?
What do you mean by Zen? Like Japanese Buddhism, or what do you mean?
Meditation. Seeing it being carried forward. So I guess what is mindfulness?
Mindfulness, I mean, it's the core practice that we're doing, and all of the meditation instructions that I gave tonight are mindfulness. Present time, non-judgmental, there's a quality of inquiry or investigation with mindfulness. So it's paying attention to what's happening, but it's not a detached, my perspective on it, it's not a detached observation. It's an embodied and using the mind to reflect, to inquire, to investigate what's happening moment to moment. So my definition is present time, non-judgmental, kind, investigative awareness. And the non-judgmental part of it's really important, that we're not using our awareness to say this is good and that's bad. We're using our awareness to say this feels pleasant, and check out our relationship to pleasure. This feels unpleasant, and check out our relationship to unpleasant, to pain. So present time awareness, in short, is mindfulness. And the Buddha is saying, now do this formally, train your mind. The mind's nature is not to be mindful, not to be present. He said it's like trying to tame a wild monkey, the monkey mind. The nature of the mind is to swing to the future and swing to the past and throw shit at everybody. It's a monkey mind. And that meditation trains the mind, to the monkey, to be here and to be doing what they're doing and feeling what they're feeling as they're doing it. So all, it's the core teachings of the Buddha. Yeah. Please, Ryan.
Yeah, on I've struggled with what's my part? Well, where do I end, and where does what's my karma, and what's like for instance, I say I worked on cruise ship, damage to the environment, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also doing something that's bringing joy. Like I used to work in treatment, and I felt like it was kind of a money grab at some point, even though I was attempting to help people.
Mm-hmm.
At the top, it was a different karma than what I was involved in. Do you have any thoughts on any kind of that? What's mine? What's there? Where does I end? I don't know. It's I've always it's been gray, and maybe that's okay. Those things are.
Yeah. Yes.
Can you repeat the question, because we can't hear you online?
Question was about livelihood, and when we're working for, maybe we're doing something. I use the example of Whole Foods. Maybe you're a vegan, and you're super into organic vegetables, and you're I got a job and I'm the produce person, and I get to tend to these cool organic vegetables for this organization that also sells drugs and is owned by Jeff Bezos. And, fuck, my job is good, but the organization, not so good. I don't know, I used to work in prisons, mostly volunteer, but, I'd go into the prisons and do stuff, and it's fuck, I'm part of this system. I'm trying to do good within the system. but it's a fucking corrupt system. Or, you know, like the cruise ships, like you get to play music and bring all kinds of joy to people, and you enjoy it and they enjoy it. And but yeah, the fucking cruise ship environmental impacts, all of the booze that are being sold, all of the, so I don't have a, you know, it's very in kind of modern capitalist, it's very tricky, and you don't want to get too uptight about like, well, I'm not gonna do anything. I'm not gonna, you know, engage in it, you know, but it's worth questioning. It's worth looking at, and it's worth finding your own way. And even I think this isn't probably the best advice, but it is truly how I function in my life, is that I think it's better to acknowledge where we're creating some negative karma, not pretend like it's not negative karma, and accept it. And to be like, hey, I am doing this thing that does have some negative karma to it. I'm going to choose to lie, or I'm going to choose to whatever. I'm going to take the karma. I'm going to choose to work for this organization that I know is causing harm. And I'll own whatever karma there is in that and acknowledge it, rather than pretend like I'm not part of the, I feel like eating meat is you know, in the non-killing, the Buddha said, you know, the karma's in the killing, and people can consume animals that have been killed without getting karma for it. I'm not so sure about that. I was a vegetarian for a long time and then chose to start eating meat again. And I feel like when I eat meat, there's karma in it, and I'm choosing that. I'm owning it. I don't feel like it's a karma-free activity. And I don't really love the Buddhist justification that says, like, you know, we don't kill. We keep the Muslims around to do that for us. Like in Tibet, you know, like they got into a place in Tibet where it's like they're eating yaks all of the time, but none of the Buddhists wanted to be butchers because it's in wrong livelihood. So they had to bring some, you know, non-Buddhists in to do the killing. And it's like there's still some karma in that participation and that consumption and that. Eric, go ahead.
Let's talk about contributing to the machine. You know, even if you feel like you're doing good, it just brought to mind what the monk said when we were in India about giving money to the begging children, you know, which is an industry. And so that's like a really good area. How do you feel compassion for these kids and these, you know, young women who are out on the streets begging, but it's also part of an industry too, so that you could be contributing to, you know, so yeah, that just.
I mean, there's a real wormhole we could go down here. I started to think about paying taxes. We're all contributing to some really negative shit that's happening on this planet by paying taxes. Fuck the system. But honesty. So it's so tricky. You know, it's like I want to be honest, and I want to not lie, but also I don't want to participate in supporting, you know, global. Juan, please.
Thank you very much for your teaching. Very, very good talk today. Just wanted to add something for what it's worth. There's a Zen teacher from listening to me, and this is one answer to the involved question about this way, like they contribute any parts of stuff. And part of it was he was saying that you don't have to answer this as a Zen priest, so I have to give answer from this point of view. And from his written, I guess in the that particular inside branch of Mahayana that he's part of, that if we are living in samsara, we are living in a world conditioned by greed, hate, and greed. Insofar as we remain in this world, we cannot avoid pulling some negative response. We in samsara, there is nothing that is not going to cause some harm. Even the most careful Jain in the world, taking one step, maybe killing one cell organism, unavoidable. You know, it's as long as we stay lay persons, as long as we stay householders and live in this world, and take on the responsibilities that tie us to this world. We have to cultivate compassion for ourselves is the implication, I think. Because there's a degree to which we're never going, unless we get off the wheel. You know, that's the point of the long-term point of the practice, is to get off the wheel of society. But we have to accept that it's never going to, there's not going to be purpose. And given that I just spent last 3-4 months working on political campaign, I kept that thought in my mind a lot.
Yeah. I think we'll end with just, I can't repeat everything that one just said, but it's okay. You have to remember that the karma is based in intentional actions. Unintentionally, it's impossible. It's impossible to not unintentionally cause some harm in this life. What we're trying to do is not do that intentionally, and to change our intentions to non-harming, kind, honest, compassionate intentions. That's what we're trying to do. We're out of time, Tippy. We're out of time. We can talk afterwards if you want to. That's it. Couple of announcements. New Year's Eve is Tuesday this year in a couple weeks, December 31st. I'll be doing the annual Precepts, Refuges, intention setting ceremony right here in this room. We'll do 7 to 9, 9:30, however long we need. A couple hours, hopefully. Do we start at 7 or 7:30? 7. So come early, get a seat. We set up the room. You can register online to get the link to the Zoom. It's up on the website. Best to register so that we know how many candles to have and strings. If you're doing it at home, you're going to need your own candle and your own piece of string to make your own blessing cord. So that's happening. That's the next thing, Tuesday the 31st. There's an Against the Stream 5-day retreat happening in May in Joshua Tree. And we haven't posted that yet, but we'll get it posted soon. I think that's it. The other thing is classes done by donation. Be generous. Like you believe in karma or something. I met with this gentleman over here, is a American Buddhist monk in the Tibetan tradition, Tenzin Tarpa. He just come to Los Angeles a couple weeks ago and is trying to kind of find a home and a sangha, and he's a teacher. He has an organization called Secular Buddhist.
SBT, Secular Buddhist Tradition.
Secular Buddhist Tradition. He's been a monk in the Dalai Lama tradition of Tibetan Buddhism for 16 years. And I hope you don't mind me saying this, but he's kind of struggling, having a hard time finding a place to live, and he's living on donations and not getting a lot. And so I'm going to actually dedicate whatever donations come in tonight we'll give to Tenzin Tarpa. So be extra generous tonight so we can support a monastic who's trying to find his way here in Los Angeles. And also he's looking for a place to live. If anybody has a, free, in-law unit that you don't need the $5,000 a month rent, and you can just give it to a monk for a couple years. Yeah, for whatever. So be generous tonight, and whatever donations, I'm just going to pass on to him. It's kind of a one-time thing, but I'm happy to try to help in that way and let our sangha be generous to a monastic in that way. So I think that's it. May any goodness that comes from our practice be gathered in our hearts and shared with each other and shared outward in all directions with all living beings. May each one of us get as free as possible in this lifetime, and together may we create a positive change on this planet. See you next week.